Yo, what's going on, YouTube? And welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy, Kevin Forte. Guys, we're taking a look today at the Boston Bruins as we continue our season preview series. Will the Boston Bruins make the Stanley Cup playoffs here in 2021? It may not be as guaranteed as some of you may think, so we'll be looking at that right now. So, let's start off with the additions and the subtractions of the Boston Bruins. We're going to start off with the additions. They brought in a couple of pretty interesting household names. They bring in former captain of the Columbus Blue Jackets, Nick Foligno. He comes over from the Toronto Maple Leafs via free agency. A good pickup here from the Boston Bruins. A guy that's going to add a little bit of grit, a little bit of depth, and that veteran presence into the room, adding some of that leadership. Nick Foligno is definitely a nice addition to the Boston Bruins. Eric Howler also comes in, another guy that kind of has been bouncing around the league a little bit. I mean, where is he? He's been in Carolina. He's been in Vegas. He's been all over the place. So it's good that he may finally find a fit here in Boston. Nashville was also another team. So there's a good opportunity for Eric Howler, maybe, just maybe, to replace a guy on the second line named David Krejci, which is a big task. But we'll see what happens with Eric Howler, how they utilize him. Does Bruce Cassidy put him on that second line, or does he maybe drop him into the bottom six as a depth center? They also added Tomas Nosek, who was drafted by the Vegas Golden Knights in the expansion draft, so going to be weird seeing Nosek not there. Tomas Nosek is a pretty solid player, comes in. This is, again, another depth center signing for the Boston Bruins as they still wait for some of their young guys like Studnicka to continue to develop, Trent Frederick. As those guys continue to develop, guys like Howler and Nosek kind of add some depth in front of them or potentially behind them as the season goes along. You also added left shot defenseman Derek Forber. Now, they did give Forber a lot of money and a lot of term, which I'm not a huge fan of that signing by the Bruins management, but listen, it gets it done. He's a good defenseman. He's on the left side, a top four defenseman. They're paying him top four money. That's really what Don Sweeney said in his, why he signed him for that. He said, listen, we see him as a top four defenseman. That's why we gave him the money that we did. So we'll see how that works out. They also added goaltender Lenas Allmark, the goaltender from the Buffalo Sabres, and they picked him up from free agency. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that when we look at the lineup, but Lenas Allmark is projected to be the guy alongside Jeremy Swayman going into the regular season this year, so that's something to keep an eye on. Now you look at some of the subtractions, and there's some pretty substantial subtractions. The biggest probably being one of David Krejci. David Krejci is now heading to the Czech Republic to stay closer to his family. You can't really, knock the guy on that move. But obviously Bruins fans are a little bit disappointed that Krejci is now leaving the Bees, and he may not return. It may be one of those things where that's it, So we'll see what happens. But again, when you add guys like Foligno, Howler, and Nosek, those are all guys that could play center, so that maybe that loss of Krejci isn't as bad. Again, none of them are David Krejci, but again, this is where you need guys like Studnicka and Frederick to continue to develop, and they could take that role. Now looking at some other forwards they lost Nick Ritchie, the big power forward winger. Nick Ritchie didn't have the greatest playoffs, to say the least. He didn't do that well. He didn't perform well, so the Bruins didn't even tender a RFA qualifying offer on him. He just went to free agency, now a member of their crosstown rival Maple Leafs, so we'll see how that goes this year. And they also lost Andre Kasha, who also went to the Toronto Maple Leafs. So both of those guys, former Bruins, now in Toronto, so interesting stuff there. They also lost left shot Jeremy Lauzon. Lauzon went to the expansion draft to the Seattle Kraken. Nothing they could really do in that regard. And they also lost defenseman Kevin Miller. He's had a lot of injuries, lower body injuries. He had knee issues, just multiple knee surgeries and stuff. So Kevin Miller, just a really big bruiser guy, and kind of replaced Adam McQuaid when Adam McQuaid left the Boston Bruins. So now they have to find that next guy that's going to do that. Maybe it's Derek Forber. He may be that next guy to replace a guy like Kevin Miller or Adam McQuaid on the Bruins blue line. They also lost a couple of goaltenders. Tuukka Rask has not signed a contract yet with the Bruins. And you wonder at this point if the Bruins are just going to say, you know what, we've got Lenas Allmark, we've got Jeremy Swayman. maybe we just, kind of end this thing. We've got guys to replace you, Tuukka, and that ends up being it. That may be the situation with Tuukka Rask, and he may be semi-retiring. Now, I remember I went to Game 6 when they played the New York Islanders. I know Bruins fans want to remember that series. But in Game 6, you could tell when Tuukka was coming off the ice, he was definitely trying to take it all in and realizing this may be his last time on the NHL ice, at least in the Boston Bruins jersey. So, definitely something going on there. I don't know if he's pending a retirement. I'm sure he's gotten offers from other NHL teams. So I don't necessarily know what's going on with Tuukka. If he maybe pulls a Krejci where he just goes back home to his family in Europe, that may be something we see in the cards for Tuukka Rask as well. They also lost goaltender Dan Vladar, who is now a member of the Calgary Flames. The Calgary Flames. My tongue is all twisted today. Dan Vladar was traded to the Calgary Flames. I think that was a great pickup for the Flames. But again, when the Boston Bruins added guys like, when they really saw guys like Jeremy Swayman develop and a guy like Lenas Allmark come into the equation, you don't really have a spot for Vladar, who would have been placed on waivers at some point and picked up for nothing. So that's what they get out of Dan Vladar. Going to the Calgary Flames, and honestly, it's one of those moves that you don't want to make, but you kind of have to make. And now we're taking a look at their lineup. So their lineup is going to look, again, this is according to dailyfaceoff.com. There are some pretty big names that are involved in this, but again, things can change so quickly. So don't get too hung up on the exact lineup, but just consider it, right? So you got Brad Marchand, Bergeron, Pasternak, the perfection line. We know what that line's going to do. They're a good line. You also bring back Taylor Hall, so he'll be on the second line alongside Charlie Coyle and Craig Smith. I don't know how I like Charlie Coyle as the second line center replacing Krejci, but there were points last season where that ended up being the case anyway. So there you go. Third line, you have Jake DeBrusk, Eric Howler. See, they have him in the bottom six, and Nick Foligno. So that's actually a pretty upgraded third line, I have to admit. And the fourth line, you see the young guys like Trent Frederick get in there. You have Tomasz Nosek and Chris Wagner. All three of those guys can play center, so barring injuries, maybe on that third and fourth line center role, Frederick or Wagner could play that role. And then looking at their defense, this is where things get a little bit interesting. So you're keeping Grzelcyk and McAvoy, that's your top pair. Derek Forber and Carlo together, which is a pretty... I would not want to play Derek Forber and Brandon Carlo if I'm a forward on the other team. They don't look like they'd be the most fun to play against. And then you got Mike Riley and Connor Clifton, which is pretty similar to what we saw last year. And then in between the pipes, you got Lenas Allmark and Jeremy Swayman. And the contract that they gave Lenas Allmark leads me to believe that they see him as a starting goaltender in the NHL. And maybe on a better roster. We keep saying this about guys like Ristolainen, like Sam Reinhart. We don't know how good they are until they leave Buffalo. So a little bit of a high risk, high reward situation here for the Boston Bruins in picking up Lenas Allmark. He's still 26 years old. I think this contract takes him until he's 30, 31 years old. And they're paying him like a starter. I think that's going to be the situation for Lenas Allmark going into this season. So now the question is, where does this team finish? Do they make the Stanley Cup playoffs? Now, again, they're back in the Atlantic Division, which is no easy task. They finished third in the East last year, but now with guys like Rask out, Krejci out, and they didn't make any substantial upgrades to their team, you wonder where the Bruins are going to sit, because you've got the Tampa Bay Lightning. We know how good they are. The Montreal Canadiens, yes, who they played in the Stanley Cup final, that was kind of a weird thing, so... those two teams are going to be at the very least pretty good. And then you've got teams like Toronto, Ottawa, Florida. That's 5 teams right there, right? That could make the playoffs. I think Ottawa's a little bit of a long shot. And then the Bruins, right? So it's one of those things where I just don't know if I wouldn't bet money on the Bruins making the playoffs. Would I be surprised if they got in the spring next year? Absolutely not. But as of right now, there is some concern, especially with this blue line. They added Derek Forbert. That's a great addition. But with Mike Riley and Connor Clifton, you're going back with those two guys on your third pair. The depth on in their forward core did get better. I like that. But now a full season of Jeremy Swayman and Lenas Allmark as your starting goaltender tandem, That also has some concerns in the back of my head. So, do they make the playoffs? Like I said, I'm kind of on the fence. I'm going to go with them making the playoffs because I like Lenas, Allmark. I like some of those veteran forwards that they added. But they have some big shoes to fill with guys like Krejci and Rask leaving. So we'll see how it goes for the Boston Bruins. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Do you agree with me that the Boston Bruins will make the playoffs in the 2022 Stanley Cup playoffs? Or do you have them potentially missing the playoffs? Let me know in the comment section down below. And if you guys like what we're doing here at Goal Line Hockey, want to see the latest news around the NHL and more videos just like this one, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and an even bigger subscribe down below. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys next time.